Lest history repeats itself. 21 years of human rights calamity, reports the Human Rights League of the Horn of Africa. Only 3 heads of state exchanged hands over power in Ethiopia during a period of time that is about a century. This fact by itself is indicative of the non-existence of the democracy in the country. During this extended period of time, the various peoples and nationalities in Ethiopia never tolerated tyrants. The feudal regime of Haile Selassie faced various forms of people's revolts and uprisings. Some paid maximum price, and others were condemned to indefinite incarcerations to bring the regime down. Although some of the big questions, such as the land ownership issues, got answers, the Ethiopian peoples did not see the kind of change they wanted to, especially regarding fundamental human rights. Oppositions continued in different forms of the Derg communist regime, in spite of the absolute political suppression. Again, hundreds of thousands were killed extrajudicially, and hundreds of thousands of others were sent to prison to the same extrajudicial manner. But that did not prevent the powerful Derg regime from falling. Once again, the Ethiopian peoples were very unfortunate that a political change did not come. Things got from bad to worse in cases under the current TPLF and EPRDF regime. As a result, oppositions continued to be displayed in different forms, only to be met with the harshest hands that the country has ever experienced. The country became the home of the countless official and unofficial jails of its own citizens. Most of these detention centers experienced spillover, kidnappings, disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and many other arbitrary actions happened to the daily events. Even currently, hundreds of thousands of worshippers of the Islam religion are being taken in a mass to concentration camps, such as Dedesa in the western part of the country. These all have been happening despite the constitutionally declared democratic system to the citizens of the country, simply because they attempted to exercise some of their fundamental human, social, political, and economic rights. In general, the past 2 decades under the rule of Mr. Mullas Zenawi is remembered as the time during hundreds of thousands of people became the victims of gross human rights violations. And on the other hand, the very few became advantageous at the expense of the millions of others. Besides, very astonished and equivalent to insult the peoples of Ethiopia is that Mullas's allies tried to paint him with brushes of development and growth, while the peoples in the country are living in the worst socio-economic crisis of its kind in the country's history. Some of the major points to reconsider are the systematic elimination of political organization from the transitional government, extrajudicial killings, abducting and kidnappings, disappearances, arbitrary detentions or imprisonments of civilians suspected of being members or supporters of opposition political organizations, targeting particular nationalities and or ethnic groups, for example the Oromos, Ogadens, and the resultant victimization of members of such targeted nationalities. Abductions and deportations of Oromos and other refugees from neighboring countries and incarcerations accompanied by tortures and other forms of ill treatments, cases in point being those of Tasfahun, Chemeda, Mesfin Abebe, and Muhammad Ahmed. Muhammad Ahmed in particular died in exile after escaping from prison and fleeing the country from the torture he was subjected to while in prison. More than 4,279 reported cases of extrajudicial killings and 987 disappearances of Oromo civilians, hundreds of thousands of whom are still languishing in prisons, were tortures and rapes in commonplace. The uninterrupted crackdowns against independent press and opposition political organizations. The cold-blooded mass murder of February 1994 in the town of Wardar, which more than 80 civilians, pastoralists, were killed by the government security forces. The mass murder of 424 Anuaks in Gambela, Ethiopia in December of 2003. The 2004 Loke Sedama massacre where more than 100 people were killed by EPRDF security forces. And the hijacked elections of the 2005 and the mass killing in Finfinne following the protest against the stolen elections in which 200 people were killed and 700 others wounded. In 2009, the government security force killed 42 traditional community leaders in Karabia, Ogaden. The civil society proclamation and anti-terrorism law that are being used abusively to intimidate, harass, imprison, charge, and unfairly punish journalists, political leaders, and human rights activists. The evictions of hundreds of thousands of farmers in Gambela, Oromia, and Benshangul regional states from their ancestral lands without consents and compensations, and their lands being given to transnational companies. The uncontrolled usage of chemicals that has been causing the contamination of rivers and other natural resources around the said to be industry and mining areas. Now that the person at the top of the leadership of this political system has gone, expectations are that lessons would be learnt from these failures, and that the Ethiopian peoples deserving healing from their wounds, but from the past experiences of changes in political systems, the Hrlha fears that history might repeat itself. In order to avoid the recurrence of suppressions and denials of political freedoms and the resultant human rights violations, those who are staying in power need to look back at what the Ethiopian peoples have gone through. To this end, the Hrlha calls on all regional and international human rights and donor organizations, as well as the Western allies of the Ethiopian government, to play necessary and appropriate roles by putting pressure on Ethiopia's new leader to help the Ethiopian peoples get out of the country's old human rights calamity and start a new path to genuine democracy where fundamental human rights of the citizens will be respected. Thank you for watching TV Oromia Magala Toronto. My name is Baltimore.
Nan hima waeke nchallisu arge Oromiyaatiya biyya hayyuu qaroon biyya goonni mi'irre dachee kiirra marge nan hima qabda seenaa cima nan hima qabda seenaa cima nan hima waeke nchallisu arge Oromiyaatiya biyya hayyuu qaroon biyya goonni mi'irre dachee kiirra marge nan hima qabda seenaa cima nan hima qabda seenaa cima kan sitti baqatees kan sirraa dhalatees ija tokko laalta ormaa firan jettu kan beela'eef laata dabbara laafta ula toleetti koo hunda hammattu koo abaatee wakkattu akkataa keengattu ula toleetti koo hunda hammattu koo abaatee wakkattu akkataa keengattu kaniin oore qabu isinii ambaanko otoon aboo dhaboo maaf ta'e carraanko kutaa dhaabamanti maaliif wali qoqqoodu ilmaan haadha tokko maaliif waliin ooddu maaloo yalmaan koo kutusu maaloo yalmaan koo hangafa maaloo ormayyuu guddise dabarse fi bonse maada bare daba jette Oromiyaa jette karmeen boose Oromiyaa tiya sore ko soreeti oto nuti jiru naftu boddeeti Oromiyaa tiya sore ko soreeti oto nuti jiru naftu boddeeti Nanhima waeke Chaliso arge Oromiyaa tiya Biyya hayyuu qaroon Biyya goonni nirre Dachee kirra marge Nanhima Abda seenaa cima Nanhima Abda seenaa cima Chaha bigibeen suma keessa jiru dachee keerra jiru dukkana biyyarraa ifaatti jijjiiru kunaaf albunni kee Oromiyaa madda galii biyya Oromiyaa allabdee rakkata Oromiyaa tiya albunni kee Oromiyaa madda galii biyya Oromiyaa allabdee rakkata Oromiyaa yaboonsituu tiya Oromiyaa jiituu boonaaf ganna kan uumamaan tolte Jannata arditi kamtu sin qixxaate qabeenya kee gamtaan eeggannee guddifna duree ta'uu kee addunyaaf mul'ifna egaa oolmaan kee dachaadha egaa yoom himamee dhuma egaa qabda seenaa boonsa Kumatama ada jechuun biyya jechuun anaaf Oromiyaa dhuma biyya sirna gadaa madda walqixxuu gaaddisa odaan kee mallattoo eenyummaa Oromiyaa tiyaa sore ko soreeti otoo nuti jiru naaftu booddeeti biyya sirna gadaa madda walqixxuu gaaddisa odaan kee mallattoo eenyummaa Oromiyaa tiyaa sore ko soreeti otoo nuti jiru